Origin Gents, welcome to UX, and this is Russia's ticking time bomb. Bunch of war fronts. Yeah, this is going to be an interesting one. I like topics like this, where they're talking about certain things that are happening and nobody talks about. Like, this is real issues that might be happening. So, Russia, like, I don't know, what is he going to talk about here? Like, is he going to talk about, like, how like population is like like less and less recruits are there because obviously because of casualties. Is he going to talk about economy, like if the war ends what Russia is going to do now since they're like changing to wartime economy? I don't know, but it's going to be an interesting one. Let's wait on.
Russia is sitting on a ticking time bomb, primed to go off at the minute a peace deal is reached to end the war in Ukraine. You see, over the past 3.5 years, Moscow's sent over 1 million young men to fight against Kiev. These men, some of them career soldiers, others conscripts, and many convicted prisoners, were promised glory and riches. Instead, they're returning home to find runaway inflation and a battered economy. For some, the next step is obvious. They will take the skills honed through combat in Ukraine and sell them to the highest bidder. Criminal gangs across the country are already jostling to hire these veterans. Others won't even need a gang, choosing instead to go into business for themselves. And this isn't speculation. It's something that the Russian state has already begun to witness. In October 2024, Verstka, an independent Russian media outlet, identified almost 500 cases where veterans have either harmed or killed someone after coming back home. What makes these numbers particularly worrying is the fact that most Russian soldiers are yet to return from the front line. The Kremlin is aware. Behind the grand parades and fiery speeches, officials are quietly bracing for an even greater surge in violent crime that risks spillover beyond the country's borders. Now the question is, can anything be done to stop this time bomb from exploding? A monster of the state's own making. Now it's tempting to look.
You know what? This is, yeah, I need to like, yeah, I just went back, like few seconds because I thought I misheard something. Yeah, so the Russians that are fighting in Ukraine, when they went home, they are basically turning to crime because it just makes sense, right? Like, yeah, this is a good topic because if you have certain type of skill sets, as Liam Neeson says, certain type of skill set, there's only one thing you know to do, right? This is plot of every single action movie, by the way, starring Jason Statham. Oh, I was certain like a Navy SEAL or whatever. I didn't know what else to do, so I created a mercenary group or something, right? There's always these stories like that. Even the bad guys have similar stories. Like, yeah, like I just killed for the, like Uncle Sam. Now I'm killing for myself. Like I don't have no enemy. They were target before, they're target now. And, like arguments like that. And this is a real thing, by the way, because, when the soldier comes home, what are they? Are they going to go farming? Then again, like after war, economy might suck. There might not be a farming to do. So when you have certain type of things, you're gonna go to crime. And I don't know how mafia started, Italian mafia, but there could be a similarity there. Like soldiers basically turn to doing something. But I'm not so sure about mafia thing. I am sure of biker gangs, Harley biker gangs. What are they called? Like whatever, like the New York one and everything. The biker gangs. That is like like really famous for crime and things. Which is a gang itself. It's like mafia, but it's a thing of its own. How did that start? That started after World War II. I'm a big Harley guy, so I know history of Harley, so I know this, right? They started after World War II. Why? Because in World War II, all the soldiers, or not all, a lot of soldiers had Harley bikes in the war, right? World War I, World War II, I don't know. I think it was World War II, right? World War II, they had Harley bikes, right? So those bikes they brought home. What they did, they chopped it because they have the bike now, and government gave it to them. Okay, this is your bike now. So they came home, chopped it. That's what the chopper, like thing comes from. Oh, this is a chopper. That is a chopper. That's what soldiers did. They made it into these chopped up, like sleek bikes, and then they started a group. Everybody had bike. Oh, you have a bike. I have a bike. By the way, we are also soldiers. It's already like relatability there. They started this biker group. Eventually that led to doing crimes and things. Why? Because they were soldiers. That is the only thing they knew how to do. And governments and countries are usually not great at like celebrating these soldiers. Oh, by the way, you have no skill set right now. And even if you do, you've been just doing killing and whatever in the name of your country. I guess I should do something for you. So it's easier for you to like integrate into economy, like help you get job. Like find or create jobs that is specifically tailored for you in civilization. Countries don't do that. So they just like, like cut off. It's like cutting off somebody instantly. Like somebody's on a certain thing and they're cutting off instantly. The withdrawal going to be insane. That's what this is. So they always turn to crime. There's a similar shit is going to happen here. And it's happening now. And when the war ends, all those people going back to Russia, what are they going to do? Right? Then again, maybe Russia is different. Yeah, not really. Like we know like Russian mafia and everything. But we don't know. We don't know at that scale. Would they all turn to crime or not? Like what is a crime number? How many people become criminal and mafia type people? Who knows?
Now, it's tempting to look at Russia's looming instability and see it as an unavoidable aftershock of war. After all, every nation that marches into war brings some of that violence home. However, what makes Russia unique is that the violence is the result of a series of decisions made by the Kremlin during the course of the war. Decisions that, with the benefit of hindsight, look less like strategic necessities and more like risky gambles. The first of these was the choice to recruit convicts, including murderers, rapists, and thieves, into the war machine. In late 2022, it became clear to the Kremlin that this special military operation might just last a teeny bit longer than 3 days. So they dispatched Yevgeny Prigozhin, at the time a key Putin ally and the head of the shadowy paramilitary outfit, the Wagner Group, to prisons all across the country to get recruits for the army. According to Vladimir Ashekin, the head of a Russian prisoners' rights group.
Yeah, but I think even like America do that, right? Like not in this way, but still like somebody goes to court. Like, yeah, you could go to jail or you could recruit into US Army. I'm pretty sure that's the case. I've seen that. So, but that's slightly different. I don't know. I guess it depends on the crime. I don't think they do that for higher crimes. I don't know.
Group. The Wagner Group was offering 200,000 rubles, that's approximately $2,700, an amnesty for 6 months of voluntary service in Ukraine if the prisoners returned alive. For some of the men trapped inside Russia's overcrowded and violent prisons, joining the war seemed better than serving their sentences. Others, such as Rustam Borakov, were lured by the notion of returning home not just alive, but as a pardoned man, ready to rejoin their families. Speaking to Reuters, he said, quote, "I have a small child. I wanted to get back to my family." However, once they joined, the reality was far harsher than any of them had imagined. Those who faltered or showed hesitation were beaten. In some cases, those who disobeyed orders or tried to flee were executed, their deaths used as a lesson for the rest. After their training, they were sent on meat assaults, a term coined by Ukrainian soldiers to describe the massive waves of Russians rushing a position with little cover.
This is straight out of like Hollywood. There is going to be Hollywood action movie plots in the future based on this. It just is.
In order to try and overwhelm the defenders by the sheer force of their numbers. So it's no surprise that these convicts were among the first to turn violent once they got back home. Azamat Iskalaev, convicted for the murder of his wife, was only a few years into a 9-year sentence when the war offered him a way out. Pardoned in exchange for 6 months on the Ukrainian front, Iskalaev returned, tried to pursue an ex-girlfriend, and killed her after she rejected his advances. War, to the surprise of nobody, does not rehabilitate violent offenders. It often magnifies the worst of their instincts and teaches them new ways to apply their violence. More than that, it can eliminate any fear that they had of law enforcement, especially when the Russian president himself has issued their pardons, removing a key deterrent that might have kept their darker tendencies in check. And it has had.
That is so fucked up, man. Think about as a Russian citizen. Like, what are you supposed to think? At this point, your government and your leader, right? It's only Putin. Like, does he have like, I don't know. So your leader is no longer thinking about good of your country in that way, in everyday run way. Like probably he has his vision of like, I'm doing this for my country. And when we win this war, my country is going to be good or whatever. I'm sure he has that mentality. But right now, as a day-to-day thing, your leader is not thinking about good of the country because he's not worried about rehabilitating criminals. He's just worried about winning the war any means necessary. Even if it means releasing the criminals back into society where they go and kill someone. Imagine that, his girlfriend, like she would have never thought this was going to happen. And that should happen. Like, what are you supposed to do? This has much more amplifying effect, which means crimes will go unpunished because people will be afraid to talk about crimes or even report it. What's the point? They'll come back and kill us. This is so insane. Like, this will have ripple effect that will have, there are countries around the world, like, I don't know, I think Somalia or something, which has so crime-ridden. You don't even think about, like, what law what. Russia might become that in future at that scale, which is horrifying, man. Knowing how many people are there in Russia, how big Russia is.
devastating effects on their communities. Mariana Katsarova, a UN-backed human rights expert, told reporters many of them who return, and this is an emerging trend, have been perpetrating new violent crimes to begin with against women, against girls, against children, including sexual violence and killings.
Come on.
End quote. And we want to emphasize again that this violence is currently being perpetrated by the first wave of soldiers to return from the battlefield. When, or maybe if, the war ends, more of these convicts will pour back into Russian society, and unless something changes, the violence seems destined to multiply. But the convicts are just one part of a complex problem. The second is the ease with which they and other criminals can get access to weapons. According to Dr. Mark Galeotti, one of the leading experts on Russian crime, Russia had a massive problem with illegal weapons even before the 2022 invasion. Since 2022, the volume and sophistication of arms slipping into Russia has multiplied many times over, causing a spike in the rate of gun crime. Compounding this situation is a push by several influential politicians from the ruling United Russia bloc to loosen gun control laws, especially for war veterans. They believe that the veterans can handle weapons responsibly and that keeping them armed provides social protection. Critics argue the opposite.
All of that. I saw the video of Fat Christian where how certain veterans went home and there was a police corruption and they fought back and they didn't have their gun. And I'm like, why does veteran doesn't have their own gun? I guess now it makes sense to me. Yeah, you don't want to give just gun to just even if it's soldier when they go home. Like even if you have like Second Amendment, here's the gun from like buy your own thing, go through the process. We're not just gonna give you gun. There's the whole element behind it. Like yeah, like in my head and now there's a real world element. Like when a soldier goes home and they don't have anything to do, there's a real chance they can turn to crime. I mean, not all, everybody. Like people have principles, and if like unless somebody's like pushed against the wall, most people wouldn't just join crime. But then again, people are pushed against the wall a lot of times. Civilization is kind of fucked up, right? Livelihood is really hard. It's not easy to make money most of the planet. Maybe US is better because it's the richest country, but even there, like I've heard of stories where people are pushed against, like they're like, fuck it, I don't care type of way. So you just don't want to like risk shit like that.
This will blur the lines between legal and illegal firearms, creating a cover for trafficking and spreading illegal weapons throughout the country. Our not particularly hot take, the critics are probably right on this one, aren't they? The convicts and the weapons are just one part of this equation, though. The Kremlin made other choices that are feeding into the crisis.
Don't want to pause too much, but see how hard it is to get a gun in Russia, though. That is my question. This might be Hollywood driving my thought, but everything I've seen about like how Russia and Russian mafia and things work there, and how loose things are, isn't getting gun there easy anyway? Or maybe that's not. I guess depends. Like if you're in something like Moscow and St. Petersburg, things are not going to be that easy. Like they are pretty safe cities, but it depends where you are, right?
Let's look at the economy. For the past 3 years, the Russian economy has been running hot, fueled by government contracts and military spending. That has kept GDP numbers looking deceptively healthy in the short term. However, analysts believe that the country's longer-term economic outlook is becoming increasingly precarious. Civilian industries such as timber have been gutted by sanctions, and inflation is eating into whatever pay people earn. The state has leaned so heavily into military production that any slowdown risks massive layoffs and could trigger an economic slowdown. If that happens, the issues plaguing Russian society will be magnified 100-fold. A society that was already grappling with how to reintegrate traumatized veterans and emboldened ex-convicts will now have to deal with mass unemployment. A potential economic collapse poses a significant security risk for Russia, as it might push the very people that the government needs to reintegrate into the hands of organized crime.
Yeah, but like, economy is one of those things that, I don't know, it's really hard for people to understand. Because you have to look through many lenses. There are this is like Wall Street level thing, like where like projected things and like how stock market works. That's not real there, at least not now. It's projected things, so like stock market can climb and crash without actually having any physical changes. But over time, it will have an effect, sure. Then there is element of like if you do trading with other countries, how is your goods and worth are like perceived will matter. So economy can crash based on that if the like machine stops. But Russia is like with sanctions, like Russia has blocked off most of the like it's like I don't know if it's like as bad as Soviet times where it was Iron Curtain. But it's like most countries are not doing business, and anybody who's doing business is like usually with oil, gas, uranium, and shit like that, right? So in the end of the day, you only have to rely like okay, people just need to work, and in Russia, people have to like work and buy things. It's like a in a way barter type of thing. Somebody makes something, somebody other makes something, and the ruble just exchanges. That's good enough. You need to worry about like if the value of your ruble drops, if your perceived like value drops at the global stage. But Russia doesn't rely on global stage that much anymore because of the sanctions. So do Putin and Kremlin care if the economy slightly drops, which just means that people are working slightly less, is slightly higher poverty, but that can like just go up and down? And do they really care, like if the military thing keeps churning up, do they care if certain people are slightly poor now or not? Right? That whole like economical thing where like even how to say it, like even if it slows down, it will have a ripple effect of like exponentially slowing down. That shit only works if it's like tied to the global events and global things. But they're sanctioned off. Like the perceived value of Russian goods and Russian things doesn't matter that much right now. So this is inter-country thing, isn't it? I mean, I'm pretty sure like I got that right, but if there's like I'm not an economist or something, like comment down if you know more about this, but I think that's the case, right?
There's a precedent for this, actually. In the 1990s, in the aftermath of the Soviet economy's collapse, soldiers who had fought in Afghanistan and Chechnya became the backbone of organized crime groups. Some, such as Sergei Demanin, a former senior lieutenant in the Marines, formed their own gangs. This period reshaped Russia's criminal landscape for a generation, and it is not hard to imagine history repeating itself. And we can guarantee that the effects will be felt all over the world. The global fallout. History has proven time and time again that crises in a country as large as Russia are rarely confined within neat geopolitical borders. They ripple like shockwaves from an earthquake. The first and most obvious danger is weapons. Dr. Galeotti believes that since the Russian gun market is nearly saturated from the old guns and the new, weapons will likely flow from Russia to other countries where Russian gangs have a network of allies and clients, such as Spain, Portugal, and Colombia. These arms will fuel conflicts far removed from their original battlefield. And in this, history will once again be rhyming. After the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan, the Kalashnikovs and rocket-propelled grenades once carried by Soviet troops were suddenly everywhere, from the mountains of the Caucasus to the slums of West Africa. The second is manpower. Russia has created a vast pool of men trained for war. If they return to a country where they have no prospects, they are likely to seek opportunities abroad. Some might choose to join the Afrika Korps, the paramilitary group that rose up to replace the Wagner Group in their missions across various African countries. Others might not want to continue working for the government and might instead be tempted by the myriad of conflicts around the world. They might receive offers from cartels in Mexico or militias in Syria, countries that have a history of recruiting the ex-military personnel of troubled nations. Thirdly, the Central Asian nations close to Russia face their own unique risks if the worst-case scenario plays out. Millions of Central Asian migrants from countries such as Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and more work in Russian cities, sending back money to their families. If Russia's economy slows after the war, many could be forced to return home because of the inevitable layoffs. But they will not come back empty-handed. They may bring weapons, drugs, or connections to Russian gangs. This could lead to waves of crime and political instability. Kazakhstan faces a different threat. It shares a 9,598.6 kilometer border with Russia and is home to a large Russian-speaking population. Kazakhstan has long been a target of Russian nationalist rhetoric, and one could envision a situation in which armed veterans rally around calls to defend Russians abroad, similar to the calls Moscow made in the lead-up to the invasion of Ukraine. Astana.
I mean, that just makes sense, right? Kazakhstan has always been like, Kazakhstan isn't like, there's sort of been friction in the past, which surprised me, like, oh damn, all right, Kazakhstan's giving friction to Russia. Like, isn't that a bit risky? It's just there. Russia is literally at the border. But yeah, Kazakhstan is one of those countries, like, we have to see in next decades how things go there, because risk, man, much bigger risk. Like how it's happening in Ukraine. Yeah, certain regions, certain states might suddenly become more and more militant, pro-Russian, and like slowly, like Russia could argue, like, yeah, these are just Russian state at this point, I have to defend them, type of it. Just same argument they used at Ukraine.
Could face provocations that are difficult to control. These may not come as official invasions, but rather as freelance militias, while the Kremlin officially denies responsibility. And if that sounds like us diving off the deep end into a sea of paranoia, just know that the Kremlin has already hinted at designs on Kazakhstan in mid-2020.
Yeah, it's a sea of paranoia, let's be honest. That's what I'm like, okay, when people go back to Kazakhstan, they'll bring weapons. I'm like, yeah, okay, there are 2 points to this. okay, this is a kind of an extreme. It's like saying anyone can just get. This is like equivalent to saying any American just can just buy a gun because you have Second Amendment and just do crimes. Yeah, there is that. But in the end of the day, like, yeah, you need to see how things are working. Like, when we talk about things like this, we have to talk about extremes as well. Obviously, that makes sense. That's what this channel is doing. But this is extreme. Like, that doesn't mean that people will go back to Kazakhstan, will just take weapons with them and just start to do crime and shit. I mean, some will be sure like that, but that's just how it works, right? That's how statistics work.
2022, former President Dmitry Medvedev wrote a screed on VKontakte, setting out a historical claim for Kazakh lands and declaring, quote, Kazakhstan is an artificial state. Astute viewers will note that this is exactly the sort of language the Kremlin uses about Ukraine, while the use of freelance militias to infiltrate a neighbor is the same.
This is not that hard, man. Any post-Soviet countries are at risk of Russia saying like this is just Russia. That's just how simple it is. Doesn't matter which post-Soviet country it is. If you were once part of Soviet Union, Russia could be, you will have Russian population. That's how Soviet Union worked. And Russia can argue things based on that, if not now, 10, 20 years from now. But after Putin, like anybody comes, like, would that person have same ambition as Putin? Who knows?
Playbook used at the start of the Donbass War in 2014. To be fair, Medvedev later claimed his account had been hacked and the post was taken down. But still, it's not hard to find polling from across the last 3 years that suggests a significant minority of Kazakhs are deeply worried about a military incursion from their northern neighbor. Whether or not the Kremlin launches a full-fledged invasion of Astana, or as they might call it, a special military operation, depends on how the final days of the Ukraine war play out. A successful Moscow might have a greater appetite for war. Cybercrime is another arena where the impact of a crisis could be felt. According to Politico, the Kremlin has become reliant on cybercriminal groups.
Dude, most of the Russian fighting population is kind of like drawing up veterans. Like they're recruiting like newbies, like people who don't know how to fight, just to win the Ukraine war. I don't think fighting any other country should be at the horizon. But then again, you never know how people think. Like the video itself, the video's whole topic is this. When the war stops, what are these people going to do? They might do crime. Russia could just argue, fuck it, let's do it somewhere else. Just give them something to do. That is also reality. This is not just reality, this is one of the biggest things there is of all wars of the past. When a conqueror or somebody who conquests starts conquesting, they usually don't stop because of this thing. Because if you know only thing to like fight wars and invade, that is the only thing you're going to do. Right? Because people are like, oh, it's just been 3-4 years. It's not like you've been fighting for 30 years. You can go back to doing what you're doing. A lot of things have changed. That's not a small thing to do. A lot of shit, you've seen things. You have PTSD now. You can't just go back and work at a mill or something. Right? So guy who's seen things, been through, is veteran now in just 4 years and done fucked up things, probably will do the military equivalent things, and government knows it, so they might let's find next target. That is also reality. If the peace deal signs between Ukraine and Russia might look somewhere else to do something. It might not be blatant. It's like, oh, we're invading another country. Ukraine thing wasn't blatant. They just called it special military operation. People are like, oh, are they really invading? They went closer and closer. Oh no, where they're going. Oh, by the way, they're going all the way to Kyiv. Right? So it could be slowly like doing a coup somewhere, right? Trying to like send some military troops somewhere like Afghanistan or something. Like they were already doing Afghanistan thing. They might redirect these soldiers somewhere else.
Loyal to Moscow to support the country's war in Ukraine. Once the war is over, these groups, emboldened by the support they have received from the Kremlin, might continue to conduct cyber attacks, but this time with a wider range of targets. Ransomware attacks on European hospitals, sabotage of infrastructure in the United States, or financial hacking in Asia could all be traced back to disillusioned Russian veterans making money on the side in such a scenario. Is this inevitable? So, if this is the worst-case scenario, not just for Russia, but the entire world, we have to ask, is it actually inevitable, or is it even particularly likely? For President Putin, it's not. According to 3 sources who spoke to Reuters, Putin views the prospect of an army returning en masse as a potential risk he wants to carefully manage in order to avoid destabilizing society and the political system he has built. The sources emphasize that the president is wary of repeating the same mistakes that happened at the end of the Afghan war. That is why the Kremlin has begun to harden its internal security forces. The Rosgvardia, Russia's version of the National Guard, recently announced that it would be reintroducing tank units. According to the Op4 journal Substack,
See, one of the things Russia can do and Putin can do is to recruit them into either royal guards or something controlled by the government. If you're still getting paid and is part of the actual combative style arm of government, whether it's royal guard or part of the active military or whatever, you're not going to look for money and like some crime or whatever the fuck that is. So what Putin can do is recruit them into the actual government and actual part of the, like royal guard or something when they come home. That just makes sense, right? I don't know, like something like that. Russia will that's kind of like a easier said than done, because now where Russia is going to find money to pay them to do basically not much of thing. There's a reason why there's a specific amount of royal guards and like people there. You can just 10 times increase that, just bring back people on, like recruit them. Where the money is going to come from, Putin will have to like figure that out. But yeah, you can basically do that.
This decision is portrayed as necessary to bolster the firepower of Russian internal security forces and boost their interoperability with the conventional military. However, the author questioned that justification, as Rosgvardia's role in the war has diminished since the initial invasion. They believe that the upgrades are linked to fears within Russia of the security impact of the demobilization. In other words, Russia's strategy is basically not to prevent the fire, but to have enough firemen for when the flames inevitably appear. Dr. Mark Galeotti offers a different suggestion. In a paper for the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, he argues that Russia should develop a comprehensive disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration (DDR) plan to tackle the ongoing crisis. DDR is not a unique idea and has been attempted in many conflicts around the world, such as Liberia and the DRC, with varying levels of success. Dr. Galeotti believes this is Russia's only path away from the crisis. On disarmament, he warns that without an immediate and credible program to collect the trophy weapons picked up from Ukraine, Russia will lose any chance of reversing the tide of illegal weapons. And not just the weapons coming in from Ukraine, but those in the hands of the gangs. Proper disarmament would require systematic buyback schemes, strict amnesties for veterans who surrender their arms, and tighter oversight of the country's poorest border regions where trafficking thrives. Beyond the weapons lies the thornier question of demobilization, or rather, how to send soldiers home after the war. The traditional route of sending them home involves a handshake, a paycheck, and a medal. That's a recipe of a disaster here. Russia requires a structured exit program that emphasizes several important factors. 1. Screenings for trauma and addiction to ensure that soldiers get the proper help they need once they're out of the army. 2. Staggering the releases instead of releasing all the soldiers at once. And 3. Transitional employment to prevent former soldiers from sinking into joblessness. And finally, there's the most difficult part: reintegration. To properly reintegrate the soldiers, the Russian establishment must acknowledge the challenges that these men are going through. They're dealing with PTSD, substance abuse, and a learned dependency on violence, which will affect how they interact with civilians. To handle this,
there is a real world element of where grown-ass men, especially who fought a war, doesn't want to like open up to people. That feels counterintuitive. Like, why not? It's the people are there to help. This is how human nature works. So there's also that element. Like, we just say this like, oh, let's just do this. Would that even work? We talk like, like psychologists are just foolproof perfection. Do psychology work? Yeah, but it's not just simple as that. Like, a person have to be open to it completely. People can even lie to themselves and not even realize it, and like not really open them up, and just like, so the most things I can see happening is people just like getting through this. It's like eye exam from like US military. Or is your eye working? Yeah, it's working. That's it. People would just pass through these checks and would not really pass through. So I don't know about this. And on top of that, like, would Russia have enough money after war and all this to actually do this and like do this at a level? Would Russia care enough to do this? I mean, you would say like, oh, they didn't to care. This is important. But would Russia see it that way at that point? That's the thing. You need excess money to like, oh, I'm going to implement this. I don't even see US kind of doing that after war at that scale, right? And US has a lot of money. Like, why are we spending money like that? Yeah, they can go home and do their like CS rink or something. Russia doing that, I don't see that, man.
Russia needs to invest heavily in healthcare and welfare. If reintroduction fails, veterans will not just be criminals in waiting, they will become a political constituency of angry, disillusioned men who feel betrayed by the state. And these are the most dangerous men of all. Thank you for watching.
Yeah, and also another element is like, Russia might not see it this way. this is the extreme version, like this could happen. Let's imagine the extreme version, this could happen. And the point is probably would happen, because if we see the history, if we see the past evidence, this would happen. But would Russia see it that way? They're like, yeah, probably everything's gonna be fine. What you talking about? I'm not gonna spend my money to do all this shit. This is like, oh, by the way, left wingers are like just like exaggerating and being paranoid type of way, even though it might be true. There is that resistance of human nature, like, oh, this is not gonna happen. What the fuck are you talking about? I'm not spending money for this, might happen. It's like global warming. Oh, global warming is real. Every single major scientist of the planet says global warming is happening. Most people don't give a fuck. Yeah, there are things that are happening. Companies are like doing things which is not really working, but they're doing things. But everybody at the government scale, at the highest scale, are they doing it? No, not really. If anything, Trump and everybody just like coming like, yeah, fuck Paris Accord, fuck global warming. I don't know, somebody in the comment will say global warming is not real. You don't know shit, shut the fuck up, it is. I like how people think like democracy means I can tell an expert who has much higher brain cell than me, who has much higher grades than me, right? Who knows much more things than I ever will, is a proper scientist. Scientist tells me that global warming is real, but just because I live in a democracy, I can just say, no, you're wrong. No, you can say that. That doesn't mean he's wrong. It just means you're an idiot and the country is going to burn. That's what's going to happen. Right? That was Ticking Time Bomb by channel Warfronts. If you like my channel, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.